Let me ask you something. Have you ever been on a spot, a really good spot, where you're just hammering small perch, one after another? The action is great, your rod is bent all day, but that giant pike you were hoping for never shows up. You tell yourself it's just bad luck. But what if I told you that catching all those perch is the very reason the monster pike is ignoring you? Today, we're going to shatter a common belief. We're going to talk about why a successful day of catching small fish might be the biggest mistake you can make when you're hunting for a true giant. Stick around, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you fish forever. So, here's a question to get you started. Do you think a lot of action is always a good thing? Let me know in the comments. For generations, we've been taught a simple rule: find the baitfish and you'll find the predators. It makes perfect sense, right? A big pike needs to eat, so it's going to hang around the buffet. This logic leads us to find those big schools of perch or roach, and we start fishing them hard. We get a ton of bites, we feel like we're in the right place, and we think it's only a matter of time before the big one hits. It's a habit, a comfortable routine. We see action, and our brain tells us we're doing everything right. We've done it for years because sometimes it works. A smaller, dumber pike might absolutely smash a lure in the middle of that chaos. But we're not here to talk about the small ones. We're talking about the old, wise trophy fish, the ones that have seen it all, and for them, the rules are completely different. The very thing we think is attracting them might be sending up a giant red flag that says danger, avoid at all costs. Let's paint a picture. It's early morning. The mist is coming off the water. You pull up to a beautiful weed edge that just screams pike. You make a cast with a small spinner, and bam, a perch hits it. Then another and another. For the next hour, you're in heaven, pulling in a dozen or more feisty little perch. You're thinking, this is fantastic. The food is here, the big pike must be close, I'll just wait them out. You're feeling confident. The activity is high, the spot is alive. But as the sun gets higher, the perch bites slow down, and the spot goes dead. Not just for perch, but for everything. You make a few more casts with a big pike lure, but get nothing, not even a follow. You leave the spot thinking the pike just weren't biting today. The truth is, they were probably there. They saw the whole show, and they quietly slipped away because you made too much noise. You weren't ringing the dinner bell, you were sounding an alarm. So you're sitting there wondering where the big fish went. You were in the perfect spot at the perfect time. What happened? You've created what I call an invisible wall. Think of it from the pike's perspective. It's sitting just inside that weed bed watching. It sees one perch suddenly panic and get yanked out of the water. Okay, interesting. An easy meal opportunity gone, then it happens again, and again, and again. To the pike, this isn't a sign of a feeding opportunity. This is a sign of a highly efficient, highly dangerous predator in the area that is picking off fish one by one. Old big pike didn't get old and big by being stupid. Their survival instinct is razor sharp. When they see a dozen of their food source disappear in a chaotic, unnatural way, their brain doesn't say food, it says danger. You, the angler, have become the threat, and the pike will put up an invisible wall between you and them, refusing to cross into what it now sees as a death trap. We need to get one thing straight. Pike are not mindless eating machines. This is probably the biggest myth in predator fishing. Yes, they can be aggressive, but the really big ones, the ones over 40 inches, are survivors. They are the smartest, most cautious fish in their environment. They've dodged nets, eagles, otters, and dozens of fishermen over the years. They can tell the difference between a naturally wounded baitfish and a lure that's just a little bit off. They recognize the sound of a trolling motor, the shadow of a boat, and the vibration of a heavy lead hitting the bottom. So, when we assume that a big pike will just charge into a chaotic scene of splashing and struggling fish, we're giving them zero credit. We're treating a seasoned veteran like a dumb rookie. The truth is, their brain is constantly calculating risk versus reward. And a chaotic mess of 10 or 15 perch getting caught in one small area is a huge, flashing red light that screams high risk. The potential reward of one easy meal is not worth the risk of being the next victim. Let's talk about sound. On land, we're used to sound being muffled, blocked by trees and walls. But water is a completely different world. Sound travels more than 4 times faster in water than it does in air, and it travels much, much farther. A fish doesn't just hear with its ears, it hears and feels with its entire body through its lateral line. This organ is an incredible system of sensors that runs down the side of the fish, detecting the tiniest vibrations and pressure changes in the water. So when a small perch is hooked, it's not a silent event. The frantic struggle, the high-frequency vibrations of a panicked fish, the sound of your line cutting through the water, the splash as you land it. All of this creates a powerful acoustic signal. It's not just noise, it's information. And every predator in the area is listening, interpreting that information, and deciding whether it signals an opportunity or a threat. You are not just fishing, you are broadcasting a message across the entire spot. This brings us to the distress signal theory. A single wounded baitfish sends out a very specific signal. Its movements are erratic, but not totally panicked. It's a low-frequency thump, thump, thump of a struggling fish. This is the signal that tells a predator, here is an easy meal with minimal effort. It's the reason why jerkbaits and gliders with a pause-and-go action are so deadly. They perfectly imitate this signal. Now compare that to the signal sent out by a perch you just hooked. It's a high-frequency, chaotic vibration, a full-blown panic attack. It's the fish fighting for its life against an unseen, powerful force. This is not a signal of an easy meal. This is a signal of a deadly attack in progress. It's the underwater equivalent of a scream. A single scream might attract a curious predator, but a dozen screams from the same spot, one after another, that's not a dinner party, that's a slaughter. And smart animals don't run towards a slaughter unless they are sure they won't be next on the menu. Here is the key difference, a single distress signal versus what I call a symphony of panic. Think about it like this, a lone antelope limping on the savannah is a prime target for a lion. The lion sees a low-risk, high-reward meal. Now, imagine that same spot, but a dozen antelopes are suddenly, violently snatched away into the sky. The lion doesn't know what's happening, but it knows something incredibly powerful and dangerous is at work. It's not going to charge in, it's going to back away, observe from a distance and wait for the danger to pass. This is exactly what a big, cautious pike does. One struggling perch is an opportunity. But the repeated violent event of you catching 10 perch in 30 minutes creates a cumulative effect. The water becomes saturated with vibrations of panic and danger. It's a cacophony of fear. The pike, a master of its environment, recognizes this pattern. It's an unnatural event. And in nature, anything that is unnatural is usually dangerous. The symphony of panic you create completely overrides the simple dinner bell of a single, struggling fish. To understand this, you have to get inside the big pike's brain. A 50-inch pike could be 15, maybe even 20 years old. That's 2 decades of survival, 2 decades of learning what to eat and what to avoid. Its entire life is a balancing act. It needs to consume enough calories to maintain its massive size, but it must do so with the least amount of risk and energy expenditure possible. It's a lazy, efficient killer. It prefers to wait in ambush for the perfect, unsuspecting meal to swim by. It doesn't want a fair fight. It wants a guaranteed win. This is why it doesn't waste time chasing healthy, fast baitfish all day. It waits for the sick, the stupid, or the injured. When you create a zone of chaos by catching tons of perch, you are disrupting this entire calculation. The situation is no longer a simple ambush. It's a confusing, high-energy, and potentially dangerous environment. For an old fish that has survived this long by being cautious, the decision is easy. Get out of there and find a quieter place to hunt. You have to remember, these old fish have seen it all before. They've probably been hooked once or twice in their long lives and managed to escape. They have a memory. They associate the sting of a hook, the unnatural pull of a fishing line, and the shadow of a boat with a near-death experience. They are not a blank slate. Every encounter with an angler teaches them something. They learn to be wary of lures that move too perfectly. They learn to be suspicious of bait that falls unnaturally. And they absolutely learn to associate a flurry of activity and panicked fish with the presence of fishermen. So when you're on a spot, creating that symphony of panic, you are triggering a form of PTSD in that fish. The vibrations, the splashing, it all connects in its brain to a previous bad experience. It's a learned response. The smartest fish in the lake are the ones that have learned this lesson the best. And those are exactly the fish we are trying to catch. You are literally reminding them of the biggest danger in their world. What you are effectively doing is turning the area around your boat into the epicenter of a danger zone. Picture a 50-yard circle around your boat. Inside this circle, fish are panicking. They are being pulled to the surface against their will. There's a constant stream of unnatural vibrations from your trolling motor, your electronics, and you moving around. For a wary pike sitting on the edge of this circle, it's like watching a disaster movie. Why would it ever swim into that? It's going to do the opposite. It's going to move to the edge of the chaos or leave the area entirely. We often think that our presence doesn't matter that much, but to the fish, we are a massive, loud intrusion into their world. And when we add the chaos of catching fish after fish, we amplify that intrusion tenfold. You have to start thinking of your fishing area not as a buffet, but as a space that you are actively contaminating with signals of danger. The more fish you catch, the more contaminated and dangerous that zone becomes to a trophy-class predator. And it's not just sound, it's also about vibration in a broader sense. Every time you fight a fish, your braided line under tension creates a high-frequency hum or whine as it cuts through the water. This is a sound that does not exist in nature. Every time that perch splashes frantically on the surface next to your boat, it sends out pressure waves in all directions. The frantic tail beats of the fish as it tries to escape are felt through the lateral lines of every fish nearby. It's a multi-sensory assault. Imagine you're in a quiet library and someone suddenly starts clapping loudly. You notice. Now imagine they do it every 2 minutes for an hour. The entire library is now on edge. You're not just making a single noise, you are changing the entire vibrational mood of the spot from calm and safe to tense and dangerous. A big pike is like a finely tuned seismic sensor. It feels all of this. It's not just one thing, but the accumulation of all these unnatural signals that tells it to stay far, far away. I remember a specific trip a few years ago that perfectly illustrates this. I was on a classic early summer spot, a big, flat area with scattered weed clumps. My fish finder was lit up with baitfish, mostly small perch. For the first hour, I was doing exactly what we're talking about, catching 1-pound perch on almost every cast with a small crankbait. I was having a blast. My buddy, who was in another boat about 100 yards away, wasn't catching anything. He was throwing a huge 10-inch bulldog lure, casting it out and letting it sit. He was being incredibly patient. After about an hour of my perch fest, my spot went completely dead. Nothing. I figured they just moved on. Then I heard a shout from my buddy's boat. He had a giant on. He ended up landing a 48-inch monster. It came from the exact same type of area I was fishing, but he hadn't disturbed the water. He made maybe 10 casts in an hour. He presented a single, tempting meal without sounding the alarm. I, on the other hand, had hosted a loud, chaotic party that scared away any respectable guests. Let's call this the piranha effect. Imagine a big solitary predator like a jaguar. It sees a group of small, noisy monkeys. It might watch them, but it's probably not going to charge into the middle of the group. There's too much noise, too much chaos. It will wait for one to get separated from the pack. It's the same with pike. When you hook a dozen perch, you create a feeding frenzy in reverse. The water is churning, fish are darting everywhere. This is not the ideal hunting ground for a large ambush predator. A big pike prefers a controlled, predictable situation. It wants to isolate a single target and strike with maximum efficiency. A chaotic, piranha-like frenzy of smaller fish is messy and unpredictable. It might even attract other smaller pike, creating competition. The true giant, the boss of the spot, doesn't want to compete. It wants to dominate. And it will often cede these chaotic, low-value feeding grounds to the smaller, more reckless fish, while it waits for a better, quieter opportunity elsewhere. So if all that chaos is scaring them away, what actually attracts a big pike? The answer is subtlety. It's about creating the illusion of a single, vulnerable, easy meal. It's the opposite of a symphony of panic. It's a quiet whisper of opportunity. This is why some of the best big pike lures are not the loudest or craziest ones. Think of a big, soft plastic swim bait retrieved slowly and steadily. It creates a deep, rhythmic thump, thump, thump that imitates a large, confident baitfish. Think of a big glider that darts to the side and then hangs, suspended and helpless, for a few seconds. That pause is everything. It's the signal of a fish that is either confused or injured. It screams easy target. These signals are clean, isolated, and easy for the pike to lock onto. There's no confusing background noise. It's a clear message. Here I am vulnerable. Come and get me. This is the kind of signal that a big, energy-conscious predator simply cannot resist. The power of the lone wounded fish signal cannot be overstated. This is the foundation of almost all successful predator fishing. The key is that the signal has to be solitary. It has to stand out from the normal background noise of the lake. When you are constantly catching smaller fish, you are creating so much background noise that your main big fish signal gets lost in the static. Your big 10-inch lure might be sending out the perfect wounded fish vibration, but if it's competing with the high-frequency panic of a hooked perch 20 feet away, the pike is going to process the more alarming signal first. Your lure becomes part of the dangerous noise, not an exception to it. To be effective, your lure needs to be the main event. It needs to be the only significant, interesting thing happening in the pike's world at that moment. By eliminating the symphony of panic, you allow the whisper of your lure to be heard loud and clear. This leads us to our first major strategy change: location discipline. You have to stop thinking about warming up a spot by catching a bunch of smaller fish. In fact, you need to do the exact opposite. When you pull up to a promising location, a point, a weed edge, a sunken island, you need to treat it like a fragile, pristine environment. Your goal is not to catch as many fish as possible. Your goal is to extract the biggest fish in that spot with minimal disturbance. This means you might only make 5 to 10 casts with a dedicated trophy lure before moving on. If you start getting pestered by small perch or hammer-handle pike, you have two choices. Either upsize your lure significantly to something they can't eat, or leave the spot immediately. Don't burn it. Don't teach the resident giant that your boat means danger. Fish the spot cleanly and quietly, and then let it rest. You can always come back in an hour or two, once things have calmed down. This idea of location discipline ties directly into the next point. The first cast matters most. When you first arrive at a new spot and shut off your engine, the environment is in its most natural state. The fish have not been alerted to your presence yet. That first cast you make into the prime ambush point is your single best opportunity to catch the biggest, smartest fish that lives there. It's your stealth attack. You should be throwing your most trusted big fish lure, making a perfect cast and working it flawlessly. Don't start with a search bait or a small lure just to see if anything is home. By doing that, you risk hooking a small, noisy fish and immediately sounding the alarm, ruining your chance with the big one. Approach every new spot with a trophy mindset. Assume the biggest fish of your life is sitting there, watching, and give it your absolute best presentation on the very first try. You might only get one chance before it knows you're there. A very practical and immediate strategy change you can make is to simply upsize your lures. If you're in an area that you know holds big pike, but you keep getting bites from small perch, you are using the wrong tool for the job. Put away the 3-inch spinners and crankbaits. Tie on a 10-inch swim bait, a 12-inch bulldog, or a massive spinnerbait. A lure of this size does two things. First, it automatically filters out most of the small fish. A 1-pound perch is not going to try and eat a lure that's half its own body length. This immediately solves the problem of creating that symphony of panic. Second, a large lure sends out a very different kind of signal. It puts out a deep, powerful, low-frequency vibration that mimics a substantial meal like a small walleye, a sucker, or a large whitefish. This is the kind of high-calorie meal a giant pike is actively looking for. You stop appealing to the snacks and start appealing directly to the main course. All of this requires a shift in mindset. You have to embrace the patience game. Trophy pike hunting is not a numbers game, it's a quality game. It's about being willing to go hours or even a full day without a single bite in the pursuit of that one giant fish. It's the opposite of the instant gratification we get from catching dozens of small perch. It requires confidence in your strategy, your spot, and your lure. It means making slow, deliberate casts. It means spending more time observing the water and your electronics than actually fishing. It means having the discipline to not get distracted by the easy bites from smaller fish. Many fishermen can't handle this. They get bored. They need to feel the tug of a fish to feel successful. But the true trophy hunter knows that silence and inaction are often the path to success. The bite you are waiting for might be the only one you get all day, but it will be the one that matters. So how do you know when you're just making noise? You need to learn to read the signs. If you arrive at a spot and your first few casts with a big lure produce nothing, but then you switch to a smaller lure and immediately start catching perch, that's a major sign. You've just confirmed that the spot is full of small, aggressive fish. At this point, you have to make a conscious decision. You can continue catching them for fun, but you must accept that you are likely ruining your chances of catching a big pike from that spot for at least the next few hours. The better strategy is to recognize what's happening and move on. Go fish another spot for an hour. Let the first spot calm down completely. The noise you created will dissipate and the fish will go back to their normal behavior. You can then return later and approach it with the quiet, stealthy, big lure strategy we've been talking about. It's about being a strategic angler, not just a reactive one. Now I have to add a small disclaimer. Is this rule 100% true all the time? Of course not. This is fishing, and there are always exceptions. There are times, like during a major feeding frenzy in the fall, when a big pike's aggression will override its caution. It might see all that commotion and charge in to see what's going on. There are also less intelligent, often stocked fish in some systems that haven't learned these lessons yet. But we are not talking about the exceptions. We are talking about the rule for catching consistently large, educated, wild pike. For those fish, the pressure and danger rule holds true the vast majority of the time. If you want to specifically target the smartest, oldest, and biggest fish in the lake, you have to fish smarter than everyone else. You have to stop doing what feels productive, catching lots of small fish, and start doing what is actually productive for your goal, staying quiet, being patient, and making every single cast count. So, let's bring it all together. The idea that finding a school of baitfish and catching them is always the best way to find a giant pike is flawed. We've learned that the chaos, the noise, and the symphony of panic you create by catching dozens of small perch can actually create a danger zone that the smartest, most cautious trophy pike will actively avoid. The big takeaway, the aha moment, is this. Your success with small fish can be a direct cause of your failure with big ones, and this completely flips traditional fishing wisdom on its head. It means that sometimes the best thing you can do on a great-looking spot is to fish less, not more. It means being disciplined, patient, and thinking more like a stealthy hunter and less like a kid in a candy store. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to challenge old habits. If this video gave you a new perspective, do me a favor and hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on more tips that go against the grain. Now I have a final question for you, and I really want to see the discussion in the comments. Has this video made you rethink a specific time you were fishing? A time when you were catching tons of small fish but couldn't get the big one? Let's hear your stories.